Hello? Yeah, it's working. Sweet. All right. This should be the follow-up video in response to, well, this is the post running of session 1, or not session 1, I guess, the first running of the one-shot. This will be my response video to myself. Hi, me, again. And it should be a little overview of how everything went and how I feel about everything. So I'm going to pull up the information over here, and we're going to talk through, or I'm going to talk through how everything went. Introduction went fine. Everything went fine there. No real big hiccups. The players were a little less, what's the word? A little less cautious than I anticipated. I thought they might be a little suspicious of the mayor, or a little suspicious of what he was up to and what his plans were, and why does he want this sword so much, and doesn't this seem odd? But they weren't. There was a funny moment where they said, is this sword really worth it? And he said, absolutely. They were like, is he really worth it if it's such a risk to go to the Feywild? And he said, absolutely. It's not a huge risk. I can hold. I can close the portal. It's not a big deal. And their response was, well, it's worth it. Then it's worth our lives. And I hadn't thought about that. Like, I guess he is just aimlessly risking their lives. But obviously, there was the, I wouldn't ask this if I didn't think you were fully capable, which is a good one. It's a nice line to throw out there. This took a bit longer than I expected, and it did feel a little bit information dumpy. So a lot of it felt like the players didn't have questions to ask, or I didn't lead them to the questions well enough, right? So it felt a lot like, I'm going to open this portal. Here's my magic pendant. Let's open this pendant. Oh, by the way, here's your magic pocket watch. Don't forget that. And I would have liked a little bit more to have prepared in a way that I could have been like, that I could have said, I just want to outline the dangers and everything, and been like, we don't know how time progresses, and like, oh, well, is there any way that we can? Oh, yes, I have this. Right? I would have liked it to be a little bit more like they were looking for the watch and he had it, as opposed to, here's this and that and this and that, and it felt a little bit too much like I was shoving too many things at them right there at the beginning. So maybe that's something that I look at for the next time, and I try to machinate my words in such a way that they are looking for the watch and then they get the watch, as opposed to like, there seemed to be a bit of, and maybe it was just that kind of session starting timidness, but I don't know, like, it's the beginning, we'll all play a little safer, and we'll all be a little more reserved, and then we'll open up as the session goes along. Maybe that was a little bit of what it was, but it did feel a little bit like, oh, we're overwhelmed. You're saying a lot of things. You're throwing a lot of things at us. You're throwing a lot of information at us, a lot of exposition. Entering the Feywild then wasn't a big deal. Nothing about that really mattered. They did like I thought that they liked the bubblegum. It felt like they liked the air smells of bubblegum thing. Some interesting things that came up were the fact that all the trees were sentient. That wasn't something that I had thought of, but I realized kind of as they were doing it that the trees would care and the trees would know, right? Because some of them are dryad and some of them are alive, are sentient. So the trees would care and know that, like, you're dissonant humming, that doesn't jive well here. Please stop that. Right? That's kind of a thought that they have, and I like that. I like that little interaction. The timer. Did the timer work? Which I guess was my big question even going into it. The answer, as I'm editing right now on the document, is no. The timer failed. What I would have liked to have done, and what I think was a big misstep, but ended up being a boon, was that the players couldn't hear or see the timer. So what happened was it started to feel as if I was just arbitrarily calling for wisdom checks. The benefit of that was that once I realized that 10 minutes was too long, I could just arbitrarily call for wisdom checks, right? So I could say, okay, wisdom check, and they could, they could walk around for a little bit, like, okay, wisdom check. They'll walk around for a little bit, okay, wisdom check, right? The other issue was that I did not expect them to fail so many wisdom saves, and I think that's on me, because I think I forgot to call for a charisma save for the second song. So here's what ended up happening. The 10-minute timer went too long, right? So even with all the fuckery that happened at the beginning, right, when I can't think of his name now, Steven, the fire genocide, started humming, and the interaction with the trees and the dancing and all that, despite all that stalling that the players were letting me do, we still didn't get a timer to go off before they reached the dancer, before they reached whatever I named her, Lorelei or something. Them not getting there meant that while they were speaking to her, the timer went off, which means I should have called for a wisdom saving throw. The problem was they were already mid-conversation with her, and she had already communicated that she wanted to dance with one of the players. My concern was that if I call for a wisdom saving throw now, it's going to sound like she is charming them, because that's the only thing that makes sense, right? So I didn't call for it. And then you see me, if you watch the video, you see me fumble right before I start the dance, because I realized if I start this dance now, I'm going to have to call for a wisdom saving throw as soon as this ends. I can't call for one in the middle. So what am I going to do here? And I decide to call for a wisdom saving throw, and that's when you see Drew say that I'm an asshole because he thinks that I'm having the woman charm him, which is not what's happening. So and then I respond with, oh no, she has nothing to do with this, which is true, but is not something I would have wanted to communicate. So I've changed the timer to 5 minutes. I think that will do two things. One, it will hopefully cause a wisdom saving throw to happen before they reach the woman, right? Which can give them 1 point of exhaustion before the woman is even reached. That will allow them, because what I should have also done is once I realized the timer was going into the woman's time, I should have not called for it beforehand, because it severely messed up a lot of things. That is, I think, where a lot of the stumbling happened, and that stumbling led into me kind of falling on my face in the first half of this. And the players, I would like to mention, said they had fun. They said they enjoyed it. They said they liked the story. But what ended up happening is I stumbled in the beginning, which stumbled the second part of it, which ended up in me kind of falling on my face in the middle, which then resulted in parts in the middle taking longer than expected, which then resulted in some of one of the players going, "Are we even halfway? Like, where are we at time-wise?" Because it was pushing 2 in the morning, 1, 2 in the morning, and I was like, so lesson learned: don't stumble in the beginning like that. If I had to make a call like that again, I would push it off until after, now realizing the ramifications of what I did. So what happened was the timer went off. I called for the first save. That moves us to day 1, right? 1 day after. They have 7 days after. They dance with her. That moves us to day 3. They dance with her again. That moves us to day 5. They dance with her again. That moves us to day 7. The timer goes off, right? Not the timer, the pocket watch goes off and wakes them up. Problem is that now they've both started the timer interaction and the dancer interaction together, right? Which means that they have reached 7 points of exhaustion. They're exhausted, but I don't want them to black out while they're with the dancer, so I have to say, okay, you're fine to go, and accrue 7 more points of exhaustion. So now you've been awake for 2 weeks, but you're being punished, so now you're at 14 exhaustion, and then you black out. And it was just, the whole exhaustion thing felt bad for them. And at some point, I just said, screw the timer, I'm abandoning the whole idea. The correct thing to do would have been to have, if the wisdom saving throw happened beforehand, they could have had this interaction where they're like, what is that? What's happening? Wait, I don't understand. They could have had a weird moment where they thought about it. Then, if they fall asleep at the dancer, that at least makes a little bit of sense, right? As opposed to saying, okay, in real life, 4-minute span of time, they fell unconscious. You blacked out, fell unconscious, right? You went from 1 point of exhaustion immediately to 7 points of exhaustion in a 4-minute span, or in a 4-minute span of time, which feels horrible. And I think was kind of the big reason that whole thing felt weird. I think to everybody involved. So lesson learned: cut the timer to 5 minutes. That hopefully will trigger a timer tick before, and I think having the actual timer there, right? Everyone being able to hear the ding. Like a ding, oh, that's, okay, can everyone make it to DC 10? They go, wait, you have a timer set? Yes, I do. So I think that interaction will be better than me just having a timer and, oh, it went off, okay, can you make one? Then it feels like I'm just picking whenever I want. And then if they black out at the woman, then I think that causes panic that doesn't need to be there, right? And then I think that, and which was something I was worried about, was that they were going to accuse that woman and then attack her. And I was concerned about the idea of them attacking a Fae woman, clearly a very powerful Fae woman, and just immediately getting smoked by her, because I think she would laugh and vanish away. But I felt that would feel like it was taking away player agency. When they're like, we attack her, oh, she leaves. Right? I didn't want that feeling. So that was the big thing. The first big thing was 5-minute timer. Pause it while they're talking to the woman is the other thing, which obviously should have been kind of understood. But then resume it once the woman the interaction with the woman is over. And then every 5 minutes they have to make a save. And if they don't make that save, it increases a day. And the other thing that happened was, well, we'll get there. So just blacking them out whenever they hit 7 days is the other thing. And I don't think that they really picked up on that, which was something else that I thought was interesting. So even when they passed out, slept and woke up a week later, they didn't think to start taking long rests, right? They were like, at no point did they think, well, if we rest, we'll wake up. If we rest, we'll wake up, right? You need to take a long rest. Well, why don't we just take a long rest? There was a thought where the player said, well, why don't we go back and come back in? Which I thought was extremely clever and something I hadn't thought of. So I had to manipulate the Feywild a little bit. And that, I think, was also a breakdown in communication, but we'll get there. Did anything happen with the singer? I don't think so. I actually think the interaction with the singer went very well. It was way easier than I expected to get them to dance with her. I didn't expect them to just accept so earnestly her proposal for a dance, but I liked it. I thought it was nice. I was appreciative, and they danced and failed their saving throws. Now, I think I forgot the second time, because they danced for 3 songs. The first song was by decision. The second song was on the fail of a saving throw. The third song was on the fail of a saving throw. And I think between the second and third songs, I forgot to have the dancer make a charisma save. I think his charisma is actually pretty good. So I wonder if making the charisma save would have been interesting. I wonder if he would have made it, and maybe they would have gotten out. And honestly, maybe they would have gotten out, and the whole timer thing would have been fine, right? Because if they get to 7 days when they're not around anything, fall asleep and wake up, I think that's a more interesting situation than blacking out while they're in something's presence. I think blacking out while they're in something's presence is going to result in bad stuff happening. If they black out when they're with the woman, I don't think anything interesting happens. I think she just wakes up and they just wake up and she goes, oh, are you awake, or something like that, right? And just is interested that, oh, do you sleep? because the Fae don't sleep. She goes, I don't understand, but your mortal customs are so strange. But and if they ask her, she'll just say that she's for a few minutes. And I think I need to maybe drive home harder that the pocket watch keeps track of time as if it was in the material plane, because they never checked it either. And that might have been something to do with the players I had, and it might have been something to do with me not communicating it well enough. So we'll figure that out in the second session. But for the most part, I would say that the interaction with the woman went rather well. Rather well. The timer, we discussed this already. Interestingly, I did make it so they slept the whole week. Once the actual timer went off, so they interaction with the woman, right? And then afterward, so they blacked out. Timer went off, they blacked out. They woke up. Interaction with the woman, the timer went off and they realized it was 7 days. Now what should have happened is they should have immediately passed out, right? And then woke up 7 days later. And with the timer going off again, that's 2 weeks. And then they say, oh, wait, why did we sleep so long? And you go, your bodies were exhausted. And then they kind of suss out that maybe we should check. And then, oh my God, it's been 2 weeks. And you've been awake for 2 weeks. That's what's happening. And maybe I have to just straight up tell them, because time is moving weirdly. But I don't mind straight up telling them. I'm just saying, like, you've been awake for 2 weeks. That's exactly why your body's tired. But like time dilation, like that's what this is. But there's an interesting point where if you don't check the watch or think to check the watch, I think that I've given you that. If I'm a little bit more straightforward about what the watch is, I think at that point I've given you that out of just check the watch. It'll tell you the time. It's a watch. The terror. So what happened is they got to the fork, they walked, and right before they entered the forest, they blacked out. They woke up, and one of the players said, let's turn around and book it. Let's make it back to the portal, go out of the portal, come back in. That was his big thought. Something I hadn't considered. However, I don't think, when I was very clear to tell them this, that the Feywild is a place of wonder and desire, and anything that you want, the Feywild will lead you to. And I like that idea, but I don't think that it's necessarily 100% true. Because I think the Feywild itself plays tricks. It likes its tricks. It likes games. It's a place of tricks. Like it's a what's the word? Plane. It's a plane of tricks, of jokes, of games. So I like the idea that they were running towards the portal and then ended up right back at the crossroads to the forest and the river, because they just couldn't tell, right? Because the Feywild's like, don't go back, you're not going back, why are you going back, what's the point? And so the first time they chose the forest, blacked out right in front of the forest. The second time they chose the river. So they never actually entered the forest, so all the terror in the forest missed, skipped it. And then we went to the hag. And I don't know how well I outlined it on the previous one, but I, honest to God, never expected the hag to be such a big deal. I really thought that even if they see the hag, it'll just be a fun interaction with the hag. Maybe they blow on her knot and ask her to magic the sword to them and she has no idea what they're talking about. Or she knows what they're talking about and says, oh, that's past my level of power. But I can tell you how to enter. And says like a water offering will enter the stone, and it's just up over the way, and my magic is not strong enough to bring the sword out, right? Maybe she says that. Maybe that interaction happens. What I never expected to happen, because again, there was an issue with technical difficulties, which made me super sad, because one of my players' computer internet kept cutting out in the solo sessions, right? And she talks to each of you individually. She puts both of you into a trance, makes you unable to move or speak, and speaks to you mentally, which I thought was really cool, and resulted in a really cool situation that actually ended in the impossible happening. I spoke with, as I expected, the player who was less likely to actually do it first, and I spoke with him, and he started to threaten her. And by threatening her, he started to glow. He was the genocide. So he started to glow, and his body started to ignite, and he started to prepare himself for battle, which she could see. So I finished. I said, if you're done talking to her, I'm going to stop with you. I'm going to talk to the other player. He said, I'm done speaking with her. Fine. I left, and I spoke to the other player, and she was just super down for whatever the hag wanted. Right? She cast Zone of Truth, and the hag somehow succeeded on, I think, 9 charisma saving throws against the Zone of Truth. So she could tell that she was not being affected by the zone, but couldn't tell if she was lying or not. Which was super interesting because she had to keep making these and you could see that it was actually bothering her. That she was actually sitting there going like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And there was actually like a moral dilemma for her, which I thought was a really cool moment too, that I could actually have. However, I went through exactly the same 3. There's a video on this channel somewhere. By somewhere, I mean it's one of the 2. Of the interaction I have with her, spliced in with the last one, and me talking about exactly how the hag will progress. And the hag will say, one is the first thing it does first, it tries to trick, and then she fell for it. And then eventually she didn't, and then she's like, fine, I'm a hag. Did the whole fine, I'm a hag thing. Just unloosen one. Just loosen one. Not I'll grant your wishes. Didn't fall for it. And then the third thing, she said, just cast this spell. And the player's like, well, can I make an insight check to see? The dwarf goes, can I make an insight check to see if the spell will just do what she says it does? And I said, oh, sure. And she succeeded in the insight check. And I said, you don't think that's all it's going to do at all. She very much wants you to cast the spell, but you don't think that it's going to do what she says that it's going to do. And then, because the other player set his character's body on fire, right? He started to glow brighter and catch fire. And I said that's what he was doing. I said his body starts to glow brighter. His body glows incredibly bright and starts to catch fire. And she panicked, I think, for maybe forgetting he was a genocide, but more likely, I think, just panicking, because it was very clear that she was overwhelmed with just the dilemma of, should I do this, should I not do this? She just goes like, okay, I'll do it, I'll cast this spell. And I could not honestly believe, you can see in the video and in the clips that I made, you see a moment where she goes, fine, I'll do it. And my eyes just light up, and I go, you'll do it? Because I could not imagine a world where a player casts a spell given to them by a hag. A hag that's admitted to being a hag, that's very clearly bound and very clearly trapped. I was like, there is no way the players do this. And here we are. So she trades binds with the hag, which I was like, okay, fine. Maybe I'm sure she'll get out. Right? Her charisma's pretty good. I'm sure she'll get out. Immediately after this happens, I think, wait a minute, he's preparing for battle. He might just execute this hag. So, some talking happens, and they all kind of go, and he says, can I make an insight check to see if she is mind controlled by the hag? So I say, sure, and I roll a deception check for the hag. And the hag rolls a 16, and his insight check is a 15, or something similar. It was one off. And I said, no, she's not mind controlled. She appears to be herself. And they left, and they approached the Dreamstone, and they start trying to figure out the riddle. And as they do so, she attacks him, because that's what she's supposed to do. And he freaks out, runs back to the hag's hut, sets the whole thing on fire. Because he thinks that she's mind controlled. So his immediate thought is, I'll kill the hag. And he kills the hag. And that's how one of my players executed my other players. Because he ran in there, set the body on fire, and forever killed Raoul the Dwarf. Raoul the Dwarf perished in a fire on the Feywild. So that was exciting. But at this point, we had all kind of been... It was about 2 a.m. And I didn't realize how long this was going to take. I think I said in the first video, I don't know how long this is going to take. And I didn't. And the answer was about 3.5, 4 hours. Which was longer than I expected. I honestly thought the whole thing was going to take about 2 hours. But There were some interesting role-playing moments with the hag. There were some interesting role-playing moments with each other, especially while she was under the control of the hag. And I didn't expect that. I honestly didn't expect them to be that much RP, and that was something I was worrying about. Is there going to be enough role-playing in this, or is it just going to feel like make a die roll, make a die roll, make a die roll, go to combat, hear this story, slay this dragon? Like, is that going to be what it feels like? And there was a lot more role-playing than I expected there to be. There was a lot of interactions with the dancer. There was a lot of interactions with the hag, which I thought was cool and exciting. So they entered the stone. I pretty much told them the riddle, mostly because it was late, and I didn't want us all to be sitting here while they, bang their heads off the ground. Especially because a cool moment had just happened where the hut was set on fire. And me and one of the players was sharing the fact that this was an amazing moment, and one of the players was kind of in the dark. And I didn't want that amazing moment to crescendo into standing here and trying to figure out a riddle. So I made them both roll intelligence checks. They rolled really well, and both got like a 19 or something. And I was like, yeah, you can tell that the last two lines don't mean that. They mean put water on it. Pretty straightforward. I probably won't tell the riddle in the next session, but it was a combination of that awesome moment happening and the fact that everyone was really tired. They get down. The holopods thing was interesting. So I had one player that was just trying to burst them to see what would happen, and another player that I don't think understood how dangerous it was. Because one of them sprinted through the room. And I was like, okay, make 3 dexterity checks for me, because if you fail any of them, a pod bursts. And I was like, DC 10. Right, 3 DC 10 dexterity checks to run through the room. Not that bad. Not that hard, but difficult. Made all of them. I was impressed. Couldn't believe that he had made it, but he made it across the room at a brisk pace. And then the next one goes, and she fails one. And then she fails a constitution check. And takes the gas. Or does she? No, yes, she fails the first one, makes the second one, and crits the third one. Natural 20 on the third one. So I ruled that she had some fuzzy... Her brain had gotten fuzzy from the time since they left the hut. So from the hut to the dream zone, that area, that whole cool interaction, that situation where she attacked him and he ran back and set that hut thing apart, that didn't really happen. Like, she doesn't really remember. Then they went in to the dragon, and the dragon fight was sadly anticlimactic, at least for me, in the dragon. The Jabberwock. The Jabberwock fight was, to me, rather anticlimactic. To be fair, we were all exhausted and just wanted the damn thing over with. Not because it was unfun, but because it was 3 in the morning, and we were all so tired. 2 of us had to go to work, and the other one had to wake up early the next day. One moment, please, sorry. Sorry. Anyway, had to wake up early the next day, so it was we were kind of pushing. So we got in there. The dragon fight happened, and a smart player, had I really wanted to be intelligent, the smarter thing to do would have been turn round 1, lair action, summon the Bandersnatch. Dragon immediately turns around and charms the other one. Right. That gives the dragon the best chance of winning. And that is what the dragon logically would do. Now, what do I think that would have resulted in? I think that would have resulted in a TPK. 100%. Because there were a lot of factors going into that Jabberwock fight that I had not anticipated when planning the Jabberwock fight. First of all, I thought we were going to have 3 players. We had 2. One guy dipped out at the last second. So we had 2 players. Secondly, I thought the party was going to be a party. What it really was, it was a witch, a hag, and a player, and the Jabberwock. Right? So it was not a 3-on-1. It was a 1-on-1-on-1. Because the hag was... The player that was playing the hag wanted to kill that other player. And she was going for it. And as soon as my thought was, okay, he'll charm... the dragon will charm the barbarian, and the player will, the paladin will run over and heal him, and the barbarian will, slam it for like 100 damage. No, that didn't happen. So the dragon charms the barbarian, and then immediately turns and starts attacking the paladin. And the paladin's like, I'm just going to stab it. So she throws her first javelin, misses. Throws her second javelin, misses. Throws her third javelin, misses. Throws her fourth javelin, and misses. This damn thing's AC is only 15, right? It's not like it's 100. The AC is only 15. It's not that hard to hit. But she just keeps rolling horribly on these javelin throws. And the Jub Jub bird is there, right? Like, just rolling around, singing his song. But it wasn't relevant because I had a paladin and a barbarian, and the paladin refused to cast spells. So what ended up happening is I had to kind of say, okay, 2 rounds have passed. The effect passes on the barbarian because I know that otherwise we're just going to be standing here. The one guy, the barbarian is the guy that was like, hey, is this almost over? I'm exhausted. And I didn't want him to be standing there doing nothing for round after round after round after round. Right? It felt exhausting. So, you know, because it was like roll a d6. And the thing was that when he rolled 5 to 6, which was the success factor, he got to make a wisdom saving throw. His wisdom was 4. Right? He was never getting out of it. There was no way. It was a DC 11 wisdom saving throw. He had, what, a 40% chance to make that. And he's already had to hit a 20% chance just to, right? He already had to hit a 1 and 2 and 6, 33% chance just to be allowed to make his 40% likelihood. There was no way. So after 2 rounds, I let him go. I was like, okay, yep, the effects dissipate. Which I thought was fair, right? 2 rounds of being charmed. Not that bad. I was wrong, but because I honestly didn't think he was going to do that much damage. My thought process was, and again, this is still me assuming a party of 3 and a party of 3, right? Like I would think 3 actual player characters as opposed to a hag. My thought was that one player is playing a spellcaster, most likely, right? The third guy is probably going to pick a spellcaster or something because we already have 2 melee fighters. Well, the barbarian does 1,000 damage with his insane sword. He's not going to want 2 insane swords. He'll just hand the other sword to the paladin. That way, the paladin's doing like 24 damage, 34 damage a hit. The barbarian is doing like 50 damage a hit, whatever. Turns out what happened is the barbarian is just like, I'm just going to wield both swords. So as soon as he got out, he did, I think it was like 80 damage to the dragon that only has 140 hit points. So at that point, that was pretty bad for the dragon because it death spiraled pretty quickly. And I kept rolling, and it did not recharge its breath weapon. And by the time it summoned the Bandersnatch, so it summoned the Bandersnatch immediately after that, because I was like, I don't want to. I'm worried about overwhelming them, right? With the Jub Jub bird can stay on the top and it won't really attack. The Snatch will kill you, like it will kill you. So I didn't want one of them to drop and then the other one have to 1v1 because they were already kind of 1v1ing. So I just got. I think I was put in a weird situation that I did not anticipate. Even though I set myself up for it, I just didn't think it was going to happen. And then it happened. Then it happened. So, yeah, he eventually did 80 damage. The Bandersnatch comes out, tries to attack him. It fails. He just kills the dragon. Does another 80 damage and instantly kills it. Actually, he got it to 140 damage. And then the paladin, who hadn't hit it one time the entire game, hit it for 2 damage and killed it. And I was like, "How do you want to do this?" And it was this kind of cool moment where she's like, "Yeah, I get to kill it. I get to kill it." Even though the other guy was like, "I did 150 damage to it. Like, I definitely killed it." But they both got to have a little bit of a moment, and that was cool. And then the place started filling up with water, and he felt he ran over to the thing, and it was this cool moment where I was very happy that he understood that the sword did not want to go back into the tree, and he threw the sword to the hag and went to grab the scabbard. The hag opens the portal, not kind of incidentally, steps through, and she sees him swimming and he doesn't make it. What a shame, but really, that was a necessary thing. It was necessary that he made it, and it was necessary that he stayed and the scabbard stayed. Those were the 2 things that had to happen for the second party to have any chance of getting through. So, that was kind of the campaign. They fell through. She got to see the Lich come and the Lich call for it. He got to have the pods all over him, causing him to forget, which was a cool moment that all got to happen. she got to go back to the mayor. I did make a mistake, and I blame 3 in the morning for this. I did make the mistake of, 1, telling her whole epilogue, none of which was true, and 2, not interacting with the mayor, not having the mayor tell her about the second party. Which, mayor not telling about the second party, I think is kind of irrelevant. The whole epilogue thing I feel horrible about, because she was, like, super invested in the RP for the character and the RP for the hag, and just ended up, like, getting this backstory that this epilogue that didn't apply. So I did text her and say, like, I'll tell you the whole epilogue afterwards. And the whole epilogue is pretty fun, pretty cool. I think what I'm gonna do, and what I have done, is that she will start feeding on children, because she, the hag, is an archfey. The hag is an archfey of the Feywild that was chained up. Was contained to her cottage, her hut, when she, as a regular hag, killed and trapped the soul of her 2 sisters within her soul. So she did dark, horrible magics to stitch their souls together. What that means is that she, as just a regular old, as one hag, has all the powers that a hag coven would have. I think it's pretty cool. Her name is Muriel Taggart, which I stole. But I think that she's going to start stealing children from Laurenshire and working with Simon Delore to decode what the powers of the blade are. Although, she starts to notice, as she's working closely with the mayor, that he's asking her more questions about herself than about the blade. And she's starting to think maybe she's being interrogated. So she skips town. She leaves. She leaves town, having taken 4 children, consumed them, and realizing that the mayor is on to the fact that she's not as she seems, she will leave town, and realize that it's far easier to take children from these camps outside of town than it is to take it from the townspeople themselves. She obviously doesn't care about the necromancy thing, and isn't affected, which is super interesting, because the Fae have cut themselves off under the impression that they would get infected. But she is not infected. She will set up her own little hut in kind of this area of the forest, and start stealing kids, and consuming them, and turning people into hags, and start making this kind of hag cultural hag situation around her, where she steals kids, consumes them, and then sends those hags back to the Feywild. Right? Which is interesting, because why is she doing that? She's sending them back to recruit other hags, under the impression that when she has regained her full power, she will return to the Feywild and claim her rightful place as the leader of all hags, as mother of all hags, right? Her name is Muriel Taggart, but she starts to realize, as she's in the material plane, that people knowing that her name is Muriel Taggart gives them way too much power over her. She starts to realize that magically her name means so much more here than it did where she was from. So she starts to go by. She's called Yaggart at some point, Nanny Yaggart, Mammy Yaggart. And then as languages and regions shift and different words for things come in and out, she's eventually known as Baba Yaga. And that, if anyone knows Russian folklore or has played D&D extensively, is the name of the mother of hags, the queen of hags, the hag archfey in D&D, and also a very famous hag in Russian folklore, Baba Yaga. And that is, in my world at least, the origin of the Mother of Hags. Now, I fully intend, if the campaign ever happens, something very interesting to happen. First of all, I would say any Fey Pact Warlock, despite whatever Archfey they choose, will be bound to Baba Yaga. Even if they choose another Archfey, I'm going to say that is actually Baba Yaga posing as that Archfey. Because I like the idea that she is not only creating hags, but also recruiting warlocks. Just in the idea of that people that believe in her and grant her powers. It just makes her stronger and stronger, and she seeks to one day return and claim her rightful place as Mother of Hags. She may already even have that, right? She may at some point, the transition may happen from her being just Baba Yaga to being Baba Yaga, Mother of Hags, even while she's on the material plane. But she will stay here. She will remain on the material plane, under the premise of fearing persecution by the other kings and queens of the Fae. She knows that if she ever went home and didn't have enough power to essentially take on every other hag in the Feywild, and or take on several other Archfey in the Feywild that know what she did, she knows if she ever returned, she would immediately be locked up again. And she's avoiding that because who wants to be locked up again? So that's the backstory and the epilogue for Baba Yaga and Muriel Taggart, who is now in the body of a dwarven paladin. Other than that, things I'm going to change. Important things, the TLDW of this entire video, for myself, scroll to the end, me, is you lost a dwarf paladin. That changed all that epilogue stuff. That dwarf paladin is dead forever. You need to change the timer and make it 5 minutes, not 10. You need to remember that it's very important to emphasize the timekeeping abilities of the watch and not just make it another trinket. And you need to introduce the watch in such a way that the PCs actually care and they're not just getting information dumped, because that's what a lot of what obscures the information of the fact of what the watch does. Other than that, everything went well. Don't let the time run so long that you have to give away important things. Don't forget that the barbarian can do 80-85 damage to that dragon if he holds onto the sword. And other than that, run well, RP well, do well again, I guess, because people seem to like it. The two people that played it really enjoyed it. So I will see you guys later. Or me, I guess. I'll see me later. I usually do. Peace, YouTube.